We've made it this far in a course about Linux without seeing the terminal, the command line interface, that a lot of people associate with working on Linux. And with modern Linux desktops, it's entirely possible to avoid using the command line interface for a lot of tasks. But as you learn Ubuntu, it's good to be at least familiar with the command line environment, if only so you don't think of it as scary. The terminal, or the command line interface, is a text interface where we can use programs and commands to manage the system, work with data, and do all kinds of other things. The terminal that we see is really a shell, in this case one called bash, which is pretty common. I can open up the terminal application from search, or I can press Ctrl-Alt-T here in GNOME to open it up. I'll zoom in a bit to make this a little easier to see. You interact with the command line by typing specific commands. For example, I can type ls to list the files in the current folder, and then I'll press enter. And I could type cd to change the directory into one of the folders. Let's go into Documents. The pwd command prints the working directory, or it tells you what folder in the file system you're currently inside of. There are hundreds of commands that you can run at the command line, and if you start looking at user forums or help articles, or start exploring adding new packages and software to your system, you're bound to run across some of them. One of the most common you'll see is sudo, which we use to temporarily borrow access to the superuser account. When you're using a Linux machine, you're always acting as a user. In this case, I'm using my Scott user, but some actions need more authority on the system than even administrative users like me have. The user implied in sudo is called root, and it has unrestricted access to the system. So for some operations like changing the system settings or installing software, we have to temporarily use root's power to do that. And when you use sudo, the changes you can make can be irreversible. I'll use the command apt update, which is part of the command line process for checking for system updates. I'll press enter, and the system wants my password because I'm using sudo. I'll type it in, but you'll see no characters appear. That's normal. You might remember that when we checked for updates in the desktop environment before, I had to enter my password too. When this update process finishes, then I can type sudo apt upgrade to check out what of the new software that's available in the repositories can be applied to my system. What you see in the video will probably be different from what shows up on your screen. Here I can type Y to update, but I'm going to type N to cancel right now. And I'll type clear to clear the screen. Like I said, there's a lot of commands and a lot to learn about those commands. If you come across one that you want to learn about, type man followed by the command name, like ls. Man brings up the manual pages, or the built-in documentation for these commands. Use the arrow keys to move up and down, or spacebar to move forward by pages. And you can press Q to quit. The terminal can look intimidating, but it's really an integral part of being an efficient and well-rounded Linux user. If you're interested in learning more about the command line environment, I recommend you take a look at my course called Learning Linux Command Line.